We are live. Looks like it. Almost everyone. The only one it looks like it isn't is Instagram. Oh, hold it. Instagram is there too. Okay. This is great news. We have figured out how to set up all the social media. Okay, so we're live right now on X, on YouTube, on let's see here. I think Instagram. So we're definitely growing. The next one, if it's still around, that is going to be um, TikTok. But I have to reach like 1,000 followers for that. So if you're into that, you can follow that along and all that good stuff. So we have a lot of good stuff to talk about tonight. First of all, thank you. I had to postpone it for one day. Normally I don't do that. Usually it's every Wednesday, but here we are on a Thursday, and we still have plenty of stuff to talk about. A lot of interesting things happening, and some interesting scenarios setting up in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I don't think it's going to develop into a tropical system anytime soon or anything of that nature. Okay, but let's take a look at it. Okay, here we are out in the Atlantic Ocean, and we have a lot of interesting developments here. Out here is a low pressure system that tried to develop into a warm core low. It has warm core characteristics, let's say about 9 to 25, maybe 850 millibars up in the atmosphere. But then that's it, because now the polar air is coming in and cutting it off. We have another low pressure system right here that also was trying to pull off some tropical characteristics, but also got overwhelmed by the polar air mass that's invading from the northwest. Why do I find this so interesting? Well, the reason why is because we're already seeing in April the potential of these warm core lows to develop and subtropical lows. So I think that this season is going to be a very active season. I'm not ready to go hyperbolic and go nuts about, oh, it's going to be the worst season ever or any of that stuff. But it shows us already the nature of the structure of these tropical low pressure systems that we're going to have to watch out for. You're going to hear a lot about the subtropical low pressure system. Okay, now this has nothing to do with the subtropical jet stream. This is separate. Subtropical low pressure systems is a description of a structure of basically what used to be called a hybrid low. Okay, it has cold core characteristics and warm core characteristics. And in the summer, what eventually happens if they're over the tropical Atlantic is that they grow enough warm core characteristics higher up in the atmosphere. You start to get a high pressure system built over it, and it starts to set up the warm core process, the engine. Then it becomes purely tropical. As they lift up into the northern Atlantic, that same process goes more towards cold core because you lose the warm waters of the Atlantic and you start to have more of a barotropic influence in terms of the way that it generates energy. So basically the way to look at this is that there are two forms of engines, right? You have the warm core engine that can go into high octane and really explode. And then you have your cold core engine, which is more of a long duration type of event, and it can feed on thermal gradients and gradually intensify. But it's rare to have an explosive development, which is why we call them bombs, right? Off the East Coast, like your nor'easters in the winter. Those are rare events. In tropical low pressure systems, you can have rapid intensification. It's kind of the hallmark of those low pressure systems. So it's not as unusual, although you might see it in the news as being something historic. It really isn't. It's just the nature of the tropical lows. Now, with these tropical lows, the other thing to also be aware of, and why I am not going crazy about, the most active year ever or anything of that nature, is dry air. See, warm core lows, they can be very powerful, but they can be awfully fickle. And the forecast for intensification is very, very difficult because much like an ice skater on the ice, right? When they're doing that twirl and they have to go faster and faster and faster, right? Everything's got to be perfect or else they're going to slip and fall, right? Same thing with a warm core low. Everything has to be perfect. The environment has to be just right to continue that intensification process. If you get a little bit of dry air mixed in there, a little bit of cooler water, maybe from upwelling, a little weak trough passing to the north that create a little bit more shear, that can lead to unexpected weakening or not even the development of the low pressure system like what we have here. Now in this case, this is pretty straightforward. There was a limitation on when this could develop and the influence of the cold air. But I thought that this would be a great example right now to just show the core of these little low pressure systems that could start off so small and so innocent, just a couple of cumulus clouds, fair weather clouds, a little bit of stratus mixed in there, wrapping around this little low pressure system. Looks innocent enough. In the summer and in the early fall, that little spinning little nothing can become a Category 5 hurricane if you just give it the right ingredients, the right time, and the right location. So for now, not really much of a threat, but certainly very interesting. Now, when we take a look at what's out there, what's the potential? Why is everyone getting all, I guess you could say, excited in a way? Is because of what we're seeing with the sea surface temperatures. Now, we know that La Nina is developing and growing and becoming, well, developing. You know, it's taking over in Nino 1+2. It's starting to push into 3 now. Eventually, it will get out to Nino 3.4 and 4. And when that happens, that's when you're going to start to see the real La Nina conditions take over. Right now, we're in a transition period. All this warm water here and this thermal gradient right here, that's setting up a lot of convection around the date line and keeping the subtropical jet stream very active in terms of short waves. But the other factor that's influencing our weather right now is what's going on here in the northern Pacific. This is called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Okay, this is PDO. PDO has a significant impact on our weather pattern. Okay, it typically leaves more of a trough in the west, ridge in the east. That's where you start to hear the word southeast ridge, which makes snow lovers scream in agony because it usually means storm track up into the Great Lakes. And in the summer, it means, well, hot and humid conditions. The reason why we want to kind of focus on the PDO, even for tropical considerations, is that it's going to set up the potential for a sustained ridge right around the Bahamas and Florida. So if you have systems developing out here, they're more likely to track towards the Gulf of Mexico, unfortunately. You tend to have more of a trough here out in the plains. You get a ton of severe weather out here. Not always. There's always competing issues, but I'm just giving you the overall theme of a negative PDO. So you get this factor here, and then this is where it gets interesting. You start to get these systems come up, and then the remnants heads towards our neck of the woods. Why is that important? Well, look, we're done with the widespread synoptic heavy rainfall events, right? So we're going to get a little bit of a break on that. But our word table is still awfully high. If we start getting these tropical systems starting to go already in June, then that's going to lead to the remnants of these tropical systems heading up towards our neck of the woods. And you get enough of them and you start to enter in flash flooding concerns. So I'm seeing this in the negative PDO. Let's say that La Nina takes over by June. It could be by mid-May, the way it's growing here. But let's just go with June, okay, just for argument's sake. So you have it set up in June. You have the trough over the plains. And you're having the major convection and thunderstorms setting up in the plains. Why is this important? Well, when you have a lot of thunderstorms here, it pumps up the ridge to the east. Where's that ridge? Southeast ridge. What is it doing? Building up the coast. Why? Well, you have convection, you have support here with the trough, you have a lot of mass fields trying to balance themselves out. And while all that is happening, look how warm your Atlantic is. Look at that. Now, that is impressive. Okay? That is some well above normal waters in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? Now, typically you would see these temperatures late May, June, and we're already seeing them now. I don't know where we're going to be by the time we get to June and July, but it sure as heck won't be below normal, that's for sure. Unless something very major happens and, I don't know, maybe Shimu from Godzilla shows up. But other than that, it is going to be very, very warm. Why is this so important? This is all energy. Okay, this is stored energy waiting to be tapped. And the atmosphere sees this stored energy, feels this stored energy, and there must be a balance in the atmosphere. So you get a tropical wave come off the African coast. It has all this energy. The only inhibiting factor would be the Sahara Desert. Now you might be saying, Steven, the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert is in Africa, not in the Atlantic. Yes, but the dust from the Sahara Desert comes off the African coast. That could short circuit or at least delay the development of tropical low pressure systems in the Atlantic. That's one of the factors I'm watching very carefully. We're seeing a lot of that right now. Whether that continues, I'm not sure yet, but it certainly has my attention with that potential. So I'm watching this all very carefully, and I'm seeing a lot of warning signs here. But I'm also seeing, with all this development taking place here, the potential for a feedback loop. What do I mean by that? Okay, so you have your tropical low pressure systems tracking across the Western Atlantic, moving through the Caribbean, heading up into the Gulf of Mexico, making landfall somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. That moisture heads up towards our neck of the woods. That moisture transport interacts with the maritime air mass here. See all this cold water? Interesting. It sets up the potential for more troughs around the Western Atlantic, leads to a feedback process. The moisture from the remnant tropical lows interacts with that trough, enhances the frontal boundaries over the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic. We end up with more heavy rainfall potential as a result, more below normal heights over the Canadian Maritimes. Why is that important? Because the Canadian Maritime Trough then feeds back and enhances the ridge that dominates this whole region. So it's another enhancement factor, which builds the ridge. How about another enhancement factor? What about the stratosphere? The stratosphere is very important. It's given us a lot of clues if we sit back and think about what's happening here. Do you see it? All right, I'll show you. You have a lot of cold anomalies up here, which is typical because we're having an active sun. There's more direct sunlight. It kills the ozone. We're starting to get the breakdown. The cooling's taking place. All that is normal. Take a look at what's going on in the mid-latitudes right here. Okay, you're getting a lot of warm pockets showing up here. These warm pockets help to destabilize the troposphere. How? The stratosphere cannot expand out into space. Okay, it's kind of a buffer. Okay, so when it expands and contracts, it's pressing on or lifting off the stratosphere. Sorry, the troposphere. So your stratosphere, when it warms, it expands. It presses down on the troposphere, which crunches down. That leads to more below normal 500 millibar heights, for example. So where are we seeing that constantly taking place over the past 8 weeks? Constantly taking place along the West Coast and around the Canadian Maritimes, which also feeds back onto the negative PDO process. So you're getting a feedback process there. It enhances and increases circulation vertically and horizontally in the atmosphere. While that is all feeding into itself, you're leading to the block that is enhancing itself over the Northern Atlantic, which leads to more support for the tropical system to move into the Gulf of Mexico. While you're seeing that, have you also noticed we're starting to see more expansion of cold anomalies taking shape over the Atlantic Ocean? Why is this important for around the tropical Atlantic? Because the cold anomalies leads to contraction, but leads to expansion in the troposphere above normal 500 millibar heights in the atmosphere in a tropical environment, leads to less shear, more potential for tropical low pressure systems to expand, grow, and intensify, and enhances the potential for strong tropical low pressure systems. Again, with the caveat that, there could be little small issues and there could be some dust and whatnot. I'm not saying 100%, but that is a lot of observations pointing to some trouble here. Now, do I know where it's going to make landfall? No, no one does. Okay. Let's knock out some things right along the way before we go any further. Okay, so I want to make this very clear. One, there is no Category 6 hurricanes. Okay, no one knows where any of these storms are going to make landfall. No one knows. For example, every one of these storms could end up out in the Atlantic and curving away. Okay, every one of these storms could approach the Caribbean, run into shear, fall apart. Okay, I'm not saying it will. Not saying it's likely, but it's also not likely that every storm is going to hit the United States. You're going to have a lot of storms that we're going to get up to S, and half of them you won't even know where the heck they were because they won't be impacting anybody. Okay, so there is that. Okay, but the reason why I'm telling you all this is not because I need you to subscribe, which would be nice, but you don't have to. I'm not telling you for that. I'm not telling you to scare you. I'm telling you so that way you're prepared. And what I mean by prepared, I don't mean get into a bunker with the food that they keep on advertising on YouTube with the guy that says the world's going to end. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about very simple stuff. Water, batteries, food that is not perishable. Canned food, for example. Stuff that you should always prepare for heading into this season. Okay, now is the time to do it. Make sure that your basement has water sealer. Make sure there's any damage on your homes. You fix it. Get that all taken care of. If you're on the coast, you know where to go in case of major coastal flooding or in the case of a storm surge, where you're going to get yourself to. Have a plan now. So that way, when everyone else is running around, freaking out and being hysterical, you already have a plan. You're already taken care of. And half of this stuff is very simple. You just go to the store, make sure you have enough batteries, good flashlight, and enough food to take care of yourself for, I'd say 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and then usually you get back. Remember back in Sandy how long it took for everyone to start getting back to somewhat normal, right? Consider that, plan for that. Do that now, not when the storm's actually coming and also the prices are higher, right? We don't want to do that. So that is the point for tonight, for you to be prepared. Not to scare you, not to say the world's going to end, but just so you know that you are already in a good place if a storm hits, well ahead of everyone else. So all this is evolving pretty impressively in the tropical Atlantic, and I think you can see where I'm going to be going with the forecast. I mean, it's not anything that's a secret. The National Hurricane Center is warning it. There's some climatologists that are warning it. It's not something that's like, this is a secret. It's literally staring us in the face. So certainly looks like it's going to be an active season. Let's just hope that enough Sahara dust gets out there to at least blunt it and to reduce the activity so we don't have to worry about that. But if you have friends and family in Texas, all along the Gulf Coast, Florida, up through the Carolinas, and even up towards the northern Mid-Atlantic, prepare now. That way you could chill later, right? Right. See, that's what we want to do. We want to be prepared. As for tonight, it's actually pretty quiet. But if you have plants out, you're probably not very happy right now. Take a look at the dew points. Let's see if we can zoom in on this. Zoom in and see if we can get a little bit better. Hopefully you guys could see this a little better. Okay, so if you can't see very well, I do apologize. I try to improve that with the screen. But if you can't see it, basically what I'm showing here is the dew points. Yes, the temperatures are in the 40s and 50s right now, but look at where our dew points are. Winds are going to be light and variable. We have high pressure and control. Skies are clear. Don't believe me? Take a look at, let's see. Well, okay, I'll go back to that in a minute. There we are. See, enough clear skies. So we're certainly seeing the potential here for a lot of chilly conditions. Okay, why? The skies are clear, the winds are light, humidity is low. It's going to allow our temperatures to plummet back into the lower to mid 30s. So if you have any plants outside, anything of that nature, I would suggest after this chat, bring them in, okay? Because you're going to need it, because unfortunately we got another freeze night on the way. But I have some good news. Are you tired of this chilly air? Are you ready for some summer-like conditions? Well, let's go back to our stratospheric anomalies here. This is at 50 millibars. This is again from weathermiles.com if you're ever interested. I do pay for this, so just so you know. But it's a good site. It's a reliable site. And what I want to show you here is notice the anomaly themes here really don't change from the observations we are looking at. We continue to see warm anomalies here in the northern Atlantic, warm anomalies here on the west coast. So that would set up our troughs here. One thing that is interesting is that those anomalies are shifting a little bit east. Why is that important? Okay, that would suggest that our trough axis may be a little bit further east out in the Atlantic. And if we could get that set up, that means we have a better potential of driving the air masses from the Gulf of Mexico into our neck of the woods and keeping the Canadian Maritimes in the Canadian Maritimes or in Maine, because who wants to go to Maine? So you got basically chilly conditions in Maine, go down to Boston, where they're used to chilly conditions. That's fine. That's why they go to Red Sox games. And then you have the warm air surging into the New York City metro, and that means 70s and 80s, maybe even some upper 80s. So the evolution in our pattern is clearly taking shape here. And what is the evolution? The evolution is more of an influence of the negative PDL. Every day we go forward, we're seeing more and more influence of that. More and more support for a ridge over the Gulf Coast and Southeast. You're seeing that also in the ensemble guidance. And as we move forward, you see that trough here around the Canadian Maritimes, just a little bit further east. So you get your high pressure centers centered right about here. Still, this would support some easterly winds, but you get the fight more of the tropical air mass pushing up through the Tennessee River Valley, Ohio River Valley, into the northern mid-Atlantic. I still expect backdoor cold fronts to be an issue throughout May. Not so much in June. And then July, we could be getting into some more humid conditions. Hot and humid, uncomfortable. So watch that very carefully. Let's go even further out. Now, again, I think we learned about this in winter. You do not take these models verbatim in any way, shape, or form. Okay, but they do give us an idea of what we're dealing with here. What are the signals? Take a look at the faint signal here, and we're going way out in the model, so we're going way out in as far as reducing our resolution, but it still could be used to give us clues. And the clues that we're seeing here is that there's going to be a split between the subtropical jet stream, the quasi-Pacific, and the polar. So up here is your polar jet stream, and it sets up a nice ridge around Alaska, a trough around the Aleutians, a trough around Greenland and portions of northeastern Canada. Remember, at this point, the polar jet stream contracts. Your true polar air mass is up in the polar regions, the Arctic. So it doesn't have as much of an influence. It's very, very faint. Then you have your more Pacific dominant jet stream. So maybe like a split from the polar, pure polar, and Pacific. And that has the influence of the PDO with a little bit of a trough along the west coast and then more of a zonal pattern going across the United States. Then you get the stronger influence of the PDO plus La Nina, which leads to a more vigorous trough here down towards California and a ridge building somewhere around Texas to the Gulf of Mexico. There is a hint of this trough here. This might be the error right here in all of this guidance, because if you're looking at all the forcing mechanisms that are going on here, this is probably more expansive than what's being shown here because of the size of this trough. This is a great time to show that you don't take this guidance and use it verbatim. What you do is that you look at it and say, okay, where are the errors? Where do we have to make our adjustments? And that's what we're doing here in this scenario, is that we're looking at this setup here and we're saying, okay, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, cross that out, expand this ridge, boom, there you have it. Most likely what would actually happen is that this trough axis ends out here, separation between this ridge, and you get some weak tropical or subtropical low pressure systems spawning out here in the Western Atlantic. That is by June 9th. And while all that's happening, our temperatures will probably shift somewhere between near to above normal while this is all evolving and taking place. Not seeing much in the way of heavy rainfall events out of this pattern unless we have a line of thunderstorms or something of that nature. So now we understand the overall theme of the pattern and our cold air for tonight. And again, you can see in the infrared satellite picture, not a great deal of lifting, pretty quiet out there. All your forcing mechanisms are back off to the west. On the water vapor satellite picture, get used to this theme. This theme being the trough out here to the west, the ridge out here to the southeast, and this trough out here. The one thing I am worried about with the themes for this summer is that trough in the Canadian Maritimes. Because if it locks in just right, it becomes a threat for us. And the way it becomes a threat for us is that it blocks tropical low pressure systems from exiting out into the Atlantic very easily. So again, this is not meant to scare you or anything of that nature, but understand what I'm seeing here. At the very least, in the summer, when we get these tropical low pressure systems lifting up through the Gulf Coast, they will become a threat in the mid-Atlantic, somewhere between Virginia and, let's say, Connecticut, of also becoming heavy rain events for us. So the clues are there, the warning signs are there. So with this pattern overall, at least for this weekend, we don't have to worry about any major storms, which is great news. We have a ridge building over us at 500 millibars. It's going to limit our rainfall because we're going to have subsidence. But this ridge setup also leads to a high pressure system being a real pain in the neck off the coast, especially around, let's say, Long Island to the Gulf of Maine. That's going to set up an easterly wind for most of this weekend and variable cloud cover. Not a lot of rainfall though. And the reason why is because when you have this ridge axis here, it limits the rising motion of the atmosphere because you have sinking motion in the upper levels. So it kind of counteracts each other. So you can get a few isolated showers, mostly driven by the warm air transport. You can see it very nicely here at 925 millibars. There's our maritime air mass trying to put up a fight. It gets driven out. Here comes the warm air. During Sunday morning, this is when you have your frontogenesis the strongest. So I think this is the best potential for us to see some showers. We're talking about 30-40% chance. So again, this isn't like a heavy rainfall event or anything of that nature or anything that's going to ruin your weekend. But I would say if you're going out on Sunday morning, definitely have an umbrella with you. Just be prepared for that. So you see that frontogenesis, and then the warm air winds and just pile drives through. And this is when we could see our temperatures pushing up into the 70s and 80s. I would not be surprised at all by the middle of the week, let's say Tuesday, as you can see here, that somebody around the Philadelphia metro touches 90 degrees. Would not be surprised. Pretty good southwesterly wind ahead of a cold front. And also watch out Tuesday night for a few thunderstorms, possibly a severe thunderstorm. Not going to go any further than that in terms of details, but certainly the potential is there. We have some pretty good Cape values too. We'll see how it plays out. We got several days to watch that, and I wouldn't go too much into detail beyond that. Again, the weekend, you can see the moisture comes in for this weekend. Again, not looking for heavy rainfall, but plenty of cloud cover. So that, unfortunately, is going to be a threat moving forward in that respect. And over the next 90 hours, you could see high pressures in control. Now on Saturday, we start to see clouds increase, an isolated shower or two. Here we are on Sunday morning with a few pesky showers. By Sunday afternoon, it pretty much backs off. And that's it. Overall, not too bad of a weekend. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little cool, but 50s and 60s isn't too bad for this time of year. And then if you're really, really wanting to see those high temperatures, well, then that's when you want to focus in on Tuesday, where we could definitely push into the 80s. And even on Sunday afternoon, I mean, look at these temperatures. Not too bad at all. You're talking about mid to upper 70s in the Delaware River Valley, maybe even a few lower 80s. Nice gradient here too, and this is going to be a theme throughout the summer. You get that southerly wind, you're going to be stuck in the 60s out here on Long Island and parts of Connecticut, but down towards the Delaware River Valley, you could be looking at a good 20-degree gradient between Long Island and Philadelphia. So get used to that theme. We're going to be seeing that quite a bit moving forward. That's what I have for tonight. Now it is time to answer all of your questions. So let's jump into that. And we'll, of course, start with the premium area because premium members get all their questions answered, even the crazy ones. And then we go to YouTube and we'll see if there's anything else in any of the other viewing areas here. So let's see what we got here. A lot of activity tonight. That's awesome. Okay. 850 millibar temperatures below freezing over New York City Metro at the end of April. Amazing. It's not that unusual, but I'm sure there are many people who deal with the growing season who probably aren't very happy about what they're dealing with right now. But it is not the most unusual thing to experience. It certainly is one that probably you weren't expecting, obviously. But again, the key thing is the duration. It comes in and leaves just pretty quickly. So that's certainly some good news. Guarantee that one, if not both the systems persist for a day or more, they will be designated by the NHC. If they did, yeah, but they won't. Too much dry air, it's already collapsing. Any indication as the north-south width of La Nina will be at a normal width, wider than usual, narrower than usual. It seems the cooling so far in Enso is much narrower than previous transitions. A little bit too early to make that measurement right now. One thing I am noticing is that the subsurface is very impressive. Okay, the expansion and growth, not necessarily the intensity, but the expansion and growth have been pretty impressive. I think we'll get a pretty good idea on orientation and width of this influence by the time we get to the middle of next month. We'll get a pretty good idea because then we'll see all that colder water getting upwelled and we'll see what the actual growth is and the feedback factors on the SOI. As far as frontal rain from showers and thunderstorms, won't a sustained dry period help suppress convection, causing lines of storms to collapse as they hit our area? That is two different functions. Okay, so the widespread sustained dry conditions. second. I'm very popular tonight, apparently. Um, the dry conditions overall will create a drier influence overall throughout the entire northern mid-Atlantic. But what you're describing is more of a micro and mesoscale factor, which we see really start to show up in the summer. The drier conditions backs us off a major flooding potential. But remember, our water table is very, very full, okay? With especially after what we saw in March as we get through April. So it's going to take some time to back off on that. The first initial lines, here's the thing with the thunderstorms. If we get a scenario where we get a lot of humid air building in here, then the synoptic forcing mechanisms that we're looking at won't be affected by this dry stretch. Then you look at mesoscale factors, and mesoscale factors become more prevalent when you're not dealing with a cold front, but more like a stalled boundary, like a trough, or like a mid-level disturbance, or sea breeze fronts, something of that nature, where those mesoscale boundaries, let's say around central New Jersey, is usually one that sets up right around Monmouth County, because the way that the county is set up is kind of like this bowl shape that takes place right around Freehold down to Toms River, that whole area. So what happens is that you get some drier air trapped in, and the storms, when they dive in, because they're coming off of the Hudson Highlands, they start to weaken because they're sinking and they're running into that dry air gradient. That can also sometimes set up in northeast New Jersey. At the same time, because of urban heat island effect, that sets up a different gradient. So if you get these gradients that start to feed back on themselves, you start to enhance the dry areas and the wet areas, and that leads to gradients where storms intensify, weaken when they hit that gradient, and then blow up when they hit, like, let's say, Newark, or they hit the coast down towards Atlantic City. So those gradients, you still have to wait to see how they evolve and how they develop. But those factors, one's synoptic and one is mesoscale and even microscale. I heard that some groups predict 33 named storms. I mean, yeah, that would be a pretty active year, wouldn't it? That would be pretty impressive. Is it possible? Is it in the realm of possibility? Yeah, especially with the nature of the Atlantic, sure. And with the La Nina, yeah, I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to go that high. I can tell you that right now, but it is possible. I'm not saying that it's out in the field, given what we're seeing. Sounds like 1999. Redust, ridiculous hot and dry summer followed by Floyd. It's possible. Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially the humid part. Powdered milk if you need milk for anything. I never had powdered milk. Have you ever had powdered milk? Hun? Have you ever had powdered milk?
Powdered milk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used it in recipes too.
Really? Is it good?
It's alright. I mean, it works in a pinch, you know.
I never had it. It's interesting. Why does make me think the Simpsons scale hurricane episode? Oh, the Simpsons hurricane episode. You would know about that. My wife is huge on the Simpsons.
What?
The hurricane episode on the Simpsons.
Oh, yeah, my brain's not really. I'm a little all over the place at the moment.
If you are in a location where it floods, where you park your car, have a plan to move your car to a place where it won't get flooded. Absolutely. That is absolutely true. Late April and frost advisory in Union County. Just wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, it could definitely happen. It's chilly. It's not what I normally expect in April, but it's not unheard of. Going to go from running the heat this week to the AC next week. Yeah, I mean, heck, I got that going on during the day, like in a 24-hour period. After this, we put on the heat during the middle of the day because we get a lot of sunlight and with our windows, so we put on the air very, very light. You know, we keep it pretty much the temperatures right around 72 degrees all year. and it pretty much keeps us pretty good. And let's see what's going on YouTube. Holy smokes, we got a lot of stuff going on YouTube. Let's see what's the best one here that we got.
People are putting in requests. Like,
Let's get some sustained
you're
heat.
Berlin, honey.
You know what? I've been called worse things. It's true. So we'll see. See what we got here. Let's get some sustained heat and thunderstorms. Okay. I think the summer of 2024 is going to be a record-breaking hot, I'm going to assume it's hot rather than hit, summer across the United States. Well, with a La Nina and a negative PDO, that certainly is a strong possibility with a strong ridge over the southeast. I would not want to be in places like Atlanta, Georgia, for example. Probably won't be the most fun in those scenarios. So that's definitely a factor. Let's see here. Let's get severe thunderstorms and heat. I gotta ask, why? Why does someone want? I mean, look, you're talking to someone that went out tornado chasing and did all that stuff out in the plains and all that stuff. I didn't do it a lot because I had a healthy fear of tornadoes because I'm like, oh, look, I'm from the Northeast and I see this thing picking up a house. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But I get how it looks and stuff with the lightning, but I don't know, maybe because I'm a homeowner, I don't want it anywhere near me, you know? But yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty cool. I would say, personally, for me, I'm not a big fan of hot and humid summers. I mean,
Same.
you know, it's not good, and you sweat too much. It's just not good. You know, you can't enjoy outside. Some people love it. I don't know.
Those people aren't combustible.
Well, that's true. If you're kind of, what would you say, pale or?
I glow.
You glow.
Daytime.
She glows in the daytime. There you go. So yeah, the sun is not the. I can deal with it a little bit better, but Susan, no, definitely not. Let's see here. Followed by brutal cold winter next year. Well, okay. There's one thing that's talked on here about solar activity. Once we hit a peak, the solar activity doesn't fall off like a rock, right? It takes some time. So once we hit the peak, you probably have to wait about a year to 2 years before you start to get the solar minimum influence. So if it happens in 2024, like the fall of 2024, then you're looking at 2026, 2027 for any type of influence in terms of the low sunspot activity and allowing for ozone to build up. That process takes a while. It's usually about 11-year cycle. So let's see here. Any thoughts on upcoming 2024 season? Well, I mean, we've been talking about that, but I would say, like I said, I would just be prepared with what we're seeing out there in the Atlantic. Let's see if there's anything else going on here. No, I think that's it with live chat with this. So yeah, I mean, I would just be prepared. That's my big theme for today. Be prepared. Is there anything going on X tonight?
Someone said, did you know Liquid Death is now a NASCAR sponsor?
Really? You know, I tried watching NASCAR, and the only thing I kept on thinking to myself is that I feel like I'm watching the LIE. I could not get into NASCAR. I'm sorry. I thought it was cool. I was out in Oklahoma and Kansas when I was in my 20s. So it was big out there. That and college football. College football more like a religion, but you get the point. And I tried to get into it. I tried to watch it. And it just did nothing for me. I was just like, okay. Like, do they jump or anything? Do we pop wheelie? Nothing. They just go around a circle. So I respect people that love to watch it. And I actually went to a NASCAR mechanics area, with my brother, right? And it was fun because they did not expect me to pick up on all the physics. So I really enjoyed the physics aspect of it and how the engine works and all that stuff. And we're talking about different laws of how they get to that laws as far as like scientific laws. So I loved that. That was pretty cool. But in terms of watching it, I just couldn't. I'm sorry. And that's no disrespect. I'm the same way with golf. I mean, I'm sure it's fun to play. I can't watch it. I'm watching grass half the time. And then they walk and they hit the ball and then they cheer. And then someone gives them a cross look because they cheered because they were too loud. And then they walk. I don't get it. Let's see. Basketball I tried to get into, couldn't do it. The only two sports I could really get into is football and baseball. Baseball because I played it badly and football because I played it worse. So there we go. So I enjoy watching those two sports because I actually played them very badly, but I played them nonetheless. So yeah. Anything else on X?
Nope.
Let's see if I can.
Two, I think, that just popped up on YouTube.
Okay, and let's see. I'm going to check out Instagram, see if this actually. Holy smokes, we're actually busy on Instagram. Look at that.
Oh.
Wow, this actually worked. Well, hello everyone on Instagram. How you guys doing? I did not expect a lot of activity on that. And let's see here. And do we have people on? And we also have people on LinkedIn. That actually worked out well too. Look at that. Hello everyone on LinkedIn. So I wanted to test all of these social media connections during the summer and spring when like literally nothing's going on. So that way, if it doesn't work out, then okay, fine. But it seems to have worked out really well. The only other streaming we have to really work on now is TikTok, if it actually is in place. Who knows what's going on with that? Yeah, that's another topic for another time. Hey, look, whatever happens, happens. You just gotta roll with it. That's it. That's all you can do. There's nothing like playoff sudden death time in hockey. I have heard that. Look, I tried to get into hockey back when Fox had it, and they made the puck red, which I loved.
They highlighted it.
Right.
Highlighted it.
Because I could actually I actually understood. I had no idea what the rules were. I don't know what the lines mean or any of that stuff. I just love the fact I'm watching this red puck going all over the ice. And since it's the only color I see, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I did enjoy that with hockey. Let's see, what was the questions back in YouTube land? What effect does solar maximum have on U.S. winter? Okay, all right. I'm going to try to explain this. The focus on solar activity can be sometimes a little bit overblown. A little bit, okay? When you have a lot of sunspots, right, going off, boom, 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 right? That allows for some of the solar waves, some of the solar energy, let's say. I'm being not as technical here because I don't want to overburn you just yet. It helps to knock down some of the ozone buildup in the stratosphere. That process cools the stratosphere. It is not the only factor in the stratosphere. There's other things like QBO and EPV flux and all that good stuff. But it's a factor nonetheless. Okay? Now, when you have a lot of activity and it hits the earth, a wide variety of things impact the earth. Sometimes you'll get a lot of lights, like the northern lights, right? You might see that. Sometimes you get disruption in your radio waves, so your cell phone starts to act up, the internet starts to be a little screwy, stuff like that. And then sometimes it starts to knock down the ozone in the atmosphere, leading to cooling, expansion, stronger polar vortex, so on and so forth. Okay? This is a long-term factor. It's not like the sun gets active and then the ozone in the stratosphere collapses. It's not like that at all. This is a long process. Reverse, when the sun becomes less active, you get less sunspots to the point that it's zero for several months. The lack of activity allows for a buildup of ozone, which allows for warming, expansion, disruption of the polar vortex. Gradually. Again, this is not a one and done scenario. This isn't it goes quiet and all suddenly the polar vortex weakens. It's not like that at all. It is a long-term environment, okay? So it takes a while for the processes to work. So when you hear a lot of stuff about, let's say, the grand solar minimum, there's been a lot of talk about that. Some people, when they talk about climate, they like to pull that out of the hat. Like, oh, look, the grand solar minimum. I've been keeping an eye on it. Trust me, we're not there in any way, shape, or form. And even if we were heading in that direction, which some hypothesize we might, in about 50 to 70 years. Maybe. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about the sun. We're learning literally every week, right? But it's not a rapid influence. It's not something that happens like that. It takes months, years, and then you gradually see the influence. And what you want to do is understand the environment involved. And then while you're tracking that, sometimes you get some CMEs, for example, that can disrupt communication, satellites, stuff like that. That, you know, as a meteorologist, I keep an eye on because, well, I don't want to lose my satellites, right? So if it goes down, I kind of have a heads up as to why. The Indonesia volcano will not cool the planet. Not strong enough. It's pretty impressive for Indonesia and the South Pacific. It's probably creating all sorts of problems with travel. But it's not at the point where it can create cooling in the atmosphere to the point it's not that strong enough. Okay, and but it will certainly have some localized influences. That's for sure. All right, let's see what we got back here. We have any more questions setting up for X or anywhere else? Let's see here. It's interesting how this plays out on Instagram. Once again, much like my photos, it keeps on cutting me off like in half. I don't get it. Instagram, stop cutting me in half, please. I don't know. I can't. I gotta learn how to use that. LinkedIn looks pretty good. No comments. I wasn't expecting any, but that's pretty cool. It works on there. And of course, we have X. Hey, as far as baseball is concerned, isn't it nice the Mets aren't the most underachieving team? Boy, I don't know what the heck's going on with the Astros. That's just surprising. But it is what it is. But I can tell you this right now, based on what I'm seeing with the observations, this is going to be a rough growing season to start off. I think we'll get there. I mean, I think that we're moving away from any of these little freezes that are popping up here and there. Obviously, especially after this weekend, I think we significantly move away from that factor of any frost and freezes. But it's got to be hard to make any plans for this. You know what? Another thing I'm noticing in the media, everyone in the Northeast now is very much aware of earthquakes, like as if it's something that hasn't been happening. Guys, earthquakes around this region, magnitudes 1.2, 2.3, stuff like that, that has been going on forever. You're just noticing it because it brings you clicks. The 4.0, that one was a little bit much, but usually the Raritan fault line does do that quite a bit. Clearly someone put a stop to sign stealing by the Astros. Gee, I wonder what type of fandom is that. I would not be surprised. But perhaps, maybe. Also, the manager. Different manager. But yeah, I mean, I would say that I would not be surprised if the Astros go on a bit of a run. I can't see them being down that long. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Then again, my Mets, everyone called them dead at 0-5. Now look at them. They're right there in the wild card chase. I mean, I don't think they'll catch the Braves. I think the Braves are too good. But when you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. All you need is one good pitcher to get hot. So with that, I think, it's 8:55. I think we'll call it a night. Given the questions, very successful social media launch for this video on LinkedIn, on Instagram, X, YouTube. We're growing. Facebook too. Facebook, hello everyone out there. So, with that being said, we're going to call it a night. I'll be back next Wednesday. Of course, as always, you can always check out NYNJPA Weather. Subscribe. Only $15 a month. You get to ask me any question you want anytime. I know some of you guys who go out there and travel and whatnot. So definitely check that out. And of course, all the premium videos and premium content and whatnot. I will see you tomorrow. And as always, stay safe out there.